Today's headline is Fighting Them Over. What our veterans have to say about their old campaigns. The subheadline says, Captured by the Enemy, a Louisville Legion man's prison experience. This article was written to the editor of the National Tribune. It says, it was about 8 o'clock on Saturday night, September 19, 1863, immediately after the first terrible battle at Chickamauga had been fought, that a squad of soldiers belonging to the 5th Kentucky, Louisville Legion, 6th Indiana, 1st Ohio, and other regiments who were separated from their commands after a desperate fight with the enemy late in the evening, started out under cover of darkness through the drizzling rain in search of their camps. Worn out with fatigue, pressed by hunger, and some of us suffering from wounds received that day, our anxiety to rejoin our comrades continued to increase as we wandered through the weird darkness of the miserable night. The dim light of campfires glowed in the distance and appeared to us to be fully a mile away. Sick with the smoke of battle which affects a soldier more or less after a hard fight, we pursued our way with unmeasured tread through a field and near the edge of a deep wood, over underbrush cut down to decrease the speed of troops on the march, all the while whispering to one another and occasionally stumbling over some poor unfortunate victim belonging to either side, whose brave spirit had taken its flight to fame's eternal camping ground. It seemed as if we had been all night on the tramp, but we found out afterward that it was 9 o'clock and captured by the enemy. One of the officers in the squad, about 10 minutes before our capture, said to us, "Boys, let us make our way to the campfire yonder to the right. Them's our fellows, I think." With that object in view, we marched off in Indian file, feeling almost sure that we would soon be among our comrades again. We had not proceeded a great distance when suddenly the sharp click of a rifle pierced our ears, and immediately after the stern command, "Halt, who comes there?" impressed us still more deeply and kept us in short suspense as we stood still, contemplating our situation, not knowing into whose hands we were about to consign ourselves. Then in one grand chorus we shouted out, "Friends," without the countersign, which was responded to by the picket guard, "Advance, friends," and we advanced in true soldierly style, as naturally becomes old veterans, and as a matter of course, at the point of the bayonet and in short order. At the same time, stumbling against one another, for it was too dark to see our way clearly, and we held our heads erect as we marched forward. We could not tell through the thick gloom of the night whether the sentinel was a Federal or Confederate. We were ordered to halt, and the Johnny yelled out at the top of his husky voice, "Corporal of the Guard number 2! Corporal of the Guard number 2!" That re-echoed all along the picket line, passing from one sentinel to another, and was transferred to the officer of the guard. In a brief space of time, we heard the dull tramp, tramp, tramp coming rapidly down towards us. "Halt, front face, order arms," were at once given, and the officer approached, ordered us to advance in single file, which was accordingly obeyed. It was then for the first time that we realized our unfortunate situation. We were disarmed and our names recorded in the book of fate, and prisoners of war entered opposite our names. That night, we were taken in charge by the provost guard, whose officer's name I afterward learned was Lieutenant Pollard, who belonged to a Tennessee regiment. Nevertheless, he proved himself to be a deuced clever fellow to the prisoners under his charge, and to substantiate this fact, I will relate an incident which occurred to me at the time. Although not of any material interest, it may answer as a matter of record. At the time of my capture, I wore a tall black felt hat, somewhat on the Puritan style, and adorned with an ostrich plume of the same color. One of the secesh who stood guard over us approached me in an arrogant manner and said, "Hello, that's a pretty good sort of a hat you've got on, Yank. Let's swap." At the same time jerking it off and putting his own on my head, and in a ruffianly manner crushing it down over my ears with the remark, "I've worn that darned old hat long enough." It was an old broad-brimmed white slouch hat, 2 sizes too large for me, and perforated with bullet holes, and to use an oft-quoted phrase, it was more holy than righteous. It evidently had seen better days, and the owner was probably a Southern planter who no doubt donated it to the scalawag. I could do nothing more than to scowl at the fellow, for he had the advantage of me in every particular. But no sooner had he robbed me of my headgear, which was, by the way, a present from a lady, than the rebel lieutenant, who noticed the maneuvers of the guard, darted at him like a hawk after a chicken, and with drawn saber said, "I allow none of that, sir. Give the prisoner his hat, and never do you offend another in my presence again." I was surprised, and at the same time rejoiced to know that there was at least one man among our captors in whom we could confide as a friend. About daybreak on the following morning, Many of our prisoners were added to our number and marched off under guard of about 20 butternuts, the most miserable looking I had ever seen. The lieutenant, having transferred us into their hands, remarked to the captain, who was a burly, repulsive looking chap, "Treat them well, Bob." But Bob didn't seem to pay the least attention to what the lieutenant had requested of him. For he would now and then probe a prisoner with his treacherous saber and order him to step up lively there. After having tramped for more than a quarter of a mile at a steady gait, occasionally exchanging a few words with the guards on the way and also with our comrades, we at length arrived at the historical stream of Chickamauga, the River of Death, where we were allowed to rest, all footsore and weary, on a knoll near its banks. It was a beautiful Sabbath morning, clear and frosty, the brilliant sunlight peering through the tall treetops. Not a cloud obscured the blue canopy of heaven, not a sound pervaded the atmosphere, save an occasional shot from some distant picket post. The belated prisoners, tired and hungry, some of whom were stretched out upon the greensward, half asleep, while others were sitting around conversing, striving to make themselves merry under the existing circumstances. A full half hour or more had elapsed when on the rebel left a tremendous firing of musketry began, which was kept up incessantly for about 20 minutes, then ceased for a while, only to be renewed again, when a general firing began on the right, left, and center, and continued all along the line. Officers hurrying to and fro on horseback foretold that the fierce conflict of the previous day was being renewed with equal desperation. Infantry, cavalry, and artillery were making their way to the front as speedily as possible. All was bustle and excitement. Officers were distinctly heard here and there giving the word of command, and far in the advance shouts and yells went up as if a great victory was being gained. In the meantime, Captain Bob was ordered to take the prisoners to the rear and hold them there until further orders. The battle continued to rage with wilder fury. The roaring cannon belched forth fire, shot, and shell, whirling on their death errand through the atmosphere, heavy with sulphurous smoke, and scattering in every direction like demons let loose from pandemonium. The guards with their prisoners were ordered on a double-quick march down the road and through a belt of woods a short distance further to the rear, where the rebel reserve corps stood in readiness awaiting orders for a forward march to the scene of conflict. After remaining there a half hour, an officer mounted on horseback came riding up at a rapid rate and said to Captain Bob, "Rush on the prisoners to Ringgold and let no time be lost." And we were rushed sure enough. When we reached our destination, there were at least 600 prisoners waiting for the train to convey them to Richmond, which did not leave until the next morning. Consequently, we had to remain overnight. It being cold and frosty, about a dozen or more of us were detailed to carry rails and build fires, and in less than half an hour about 30 campfires were burning brightly in the prisoners' camp. Small rations of cornbread, partly baked, and Texas beef improved by age, were dealt out very sparingly to us, and that was all we received until we arrived at Richmond, the city of prisons. We boarded the train early on the morning of September 21st. It consisted of about 21 freight cars with an engine attached to each end, and into these rickety cars more than 600 of us were huddled together like so many cattle. Across the doors of these cars, strong wooden bars were placed, and at each door 2 guards were stationed to preclude any possibility of escape. When about 3 miles from Ringgold, the train not exceeding 20 or 25 miles an hour, we saw in the distance a great conflagration like that of a burning wagon train or line of cars. 2 miles further on, the engine slacked up at a way station to take on a supply of coal or wood and water, which occupied fully 3/4 of an hour. The car in which my comrades and I were housed was guarded by 4 Georgians, 2 at each door, and who were in a measure well disposed and conversed freely with us all along the route. There was one unruly and obstreperous fellow amongst the prisoners in our car, who for some reason was very indignant and abusive to one of the guards. He was finally prevailed upon by one of our men to be quiet, and under a threat by one of the guards to have him severely punished on his arrival at Richmond. On more than one occasion it was thought that he would be run through with the bayonet, but fortunately he was not. Our trip to Richmond was not altogether a very pleasant one, for both the prisoners and the guards would indulge in harsh language, hurling vile epithets at one another. The guard aggravating the prisoners by saying that they ought to be strung up without the least show of mercy, and other such like remarks, and the prisoners in turn tantalizing them with trampling the Star-Spangled Banner under their feet, and that they were on equal footing with Brant, the border ruffian and brute of revolutionary times, etc., which bored them terribly. When we arrived at Petersburg, a burly-looking soldier with a bulldog countenance and somewhat intoxicated was walking alongside the train. He wore a huge mustache on the grenadier order and was dressed in a regular butternut suit. He was armed with a conspicuous-looking instrument, the Arkansas toothpick, a brace of old horse pistols of revolutionary frame, no doubt, and a huge cavalry saber dangling at his side, striking his heavily spurred heels as he carelessly staggered up to the car in which we were standing, and assuming the attitude of Iago, accosted us in a somewhat humorous manner. "Hello there. Where does Ewins hail from? I'd kinder like to know. And where's Ewins bound for?" We good-naturedly informed him that we were from everywhere, but lately from the battlefield of Chickamauga, and bound for Richmond, Lynchburg, Andersonville, or some other winter resort for the benefit of our health, and would like to have His Majesty's company. "Yes, I rather reckon so," he replied, with a grin as he bit off 2 inches from a plug of black fat tobacco. "I'll be concerned if Ewins don't smell brimstone inside of 48 hours. My name aren't Leah Dangerfield, of the Texas Rangers, you bet." "What are you doing out this way?" said I. "I'll be John Brown if I aren't up here on a particular business," said he. "I'm a sharpshooter of the Rangers, I tell Ewins, and I'll bet Ewins a $20 federal note I can shoot your fly off your nose without touching the hide. I can. If I don't, Ewins get the stakes." I informed him that I wouldn't bet, simply for these reasons. In the first place, I'm an orphan, and had no money or friends, and in the second place, I didn't care for that kind of amusement at present. "Drive on, then," said the King of Cannibal Islands. "But hold up there, Yank. I say, what state was you raised in?" The train was slowly moving off as I shouted out, "From old Kentucky, the dark and bloody ground, the birthplace of Harry Clay." "What's all right, partner," said he. "I kinda like old Kentucky. It's a mighty nice place to live and all that sort of thing. But I'll be switched if Ewins aren't in a darn bad box now. Don't Ewins tell 'em that you're from old Kentucky, for if they find out, Ewins has gone up shore. They hate him out here for joining the Yankee Army." The last words he said to us were "Goodbye, Yanks," and he gave us a terrific war whoop like a wild Comanche Indian, and tossing his sombrero in the air, continued his frantic yells, which finally died away in the distance. He was one of the hardest and toughest old sinners I ever met anywhere south of Mason and Dixon's line. We arrived in Richmond late in the evening, and were given temporary lodging at the old Clay prison. This article was written by Alfred W. Harris of the 5th Kentucky. This story came from the great District of Columbia, being reported in the National Tribune of December 27, 1888. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.